Call this meeting to order. It is 4:33 p.m. Tuesday, January 23rd, and this is the School Health Advisory Council meeting for Conroe Independent School District. I'm Bryce Spear. I'm the parent co-chair.
And I'm Edith Upshaw, the school district co-chair.
And then for consistency on attendance, do you mind going around the room and saying your name so we have it on record for who's here, please?
Lance Miracle.
Brent Maddox.
Elizabeth Morrison.
Tony LaBelle.
Samantha Torek.
Amber Bentley.
Holly Moore.
Melanie Boujnot.
Marianne Horton. Lindsay Taylor. April Kersey.
Paula Popesky.
Clinton Dilworth.
Samira Bridget Hodge.
Robert Garcia.
Matt Blakelock.
Myla Cobbler.
Amber Dunnigan.
Erica Falcon.
Carrie Welch.
Jennifer Blackman. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. All right.
Moving on to, this is going to be, moving on to our next item is Dr. Spear did send our agenda on Friday with some artifacts and also our minutes. So you've had time to review the minutes, and they were also posted within 10 days of our last meeting. So at this time, if there's no objection, we'd ask for a motion to approve and second the minutes.
I make a motion to approve.
All those in favor? By a raise of hand. Okay, looks like unanimously we've approved the minutes. It just worked for us a second ago. Sarah, for some reason it's not working. Do you mind?
All right. So from our last SHAC meeting to present, we had 3 contacts from the community regarding a variety of concerns. The first email came from a parent regarding a lice infestation in their school and the management thereof. And so that was channeled over to Mrs. Robertson, which is the district head nurse, to tackle how those are being handled on a variety of campuses. So not anything for the SHAC to address unless anybody has any questions. I don't know that the author shared the school, but I know there is a process in place that if a student does have lice, then appropriate contacts are notified so they can be diligent and make sure they're not infected or spreading the lice anywhere. All right. The second one is a concern from a parent about the smartwatch policy on the newly passed district guidelines for cell phones and smartwatch use in school. And put simply, the parent's question is, what defines a smartwatch? And so the district, Lisa Garrison, our district administrator over those campuses, she's been talking with that parent. I think they've come up with a solution to help this family address the concern at hand. But the parent brings up a really good question. What is a smartwatch? We don't have a district-wide definition for smartwatch. a little bit of context on the inclusion of smartwatches in the cell phone policy. The smartwatch suggestion did not come from the School Health Advisory Council. That's something that bubbled up when the district assembled the district-wide committee. So it wasn't a topic that our SHAC talked about on what was considered a smartwatch. So I think it's something we need to think about, and if there's a way that we can coordinate with the district to help in providing that definition. But it's a valid question, and we don't have an answer. So that was email number 2. Any questions? Yeah.
Is that something that the committee could, or the SHAC could work on that definition? The definition that I've heard that actually I think fits really well is a device that receives and transmits input or data that also has user interaction. And so that was how a smartwatch in general would be defined, or any
Okay.
smart device. And so something that communicate, receive and submit data to something else and has user input so that it's going to have to interact with the wearer. And so that leaves it very broad so that it's not, well, it's an Apple watch and not a Samsung watch and not a Garmin and not a,
So this was when we made this policy, because I was there whenever we created it all, and that was one of the concerns that I did bring up with the committee. And so we were empowered in that with our foundations committee to make like choices within the campus. So I'll say within ours, we sat down and said, well, what's defining a smartwatch? So for us as a campus, we decided one that is either cellular enabled or it's connected to the Wi-Fi. And that was ended up being our definition for it for us. Because we had that same issue, what do we define for one and not? I mean, because there's Fitbits versus all the way down to so many different things. So our foundations committee actually answered it for us.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you. I can talk with Ms. Garrison about how the SHAC can help with this, and we can bring it back at the next SHAC meeting. So if there's anything we can do to be helpful. Okay, and then the third email was a concern from a parent regarding community use of school headphones and the hygiene or lack of hygienic nature for having community headphones that are being shared or community earbuds. And so I don't know that there's a lot of action on that. I emailed the parents, and so I didn't hear anything back, but we're all very busy, so it's not anything negative. But that was the concern and from a SHAC standpoint, that's a campus-based decision, campus-based management. So we're happy to help how we can, but I don't know what else we can do right now as a SHAC to address any of those. Anyone have comments or?
I know we have a school nurse here. I assume there's a process or procedure already in place regarding hygiene of headphones. Is that the case on campus?
Either one of us.
Yeah. It may be a little bit different for high school because we actually were discussing that yesterday when I saw it come up on the agenda. There is not a set process that I'm aware of, but we don't have as many shared headphones, so that might be more for Mila here to address my colleague.
Yeah, so I'm at an elementary campus, and as far as health services, we don't have, the guidelines for the classroom. I would probably, shoot that back to the teacher, the classroom teacher, to be able to manage that. I know for health services, we do the hearing screenings, and they do go from child to child, but we do have a cleaning wipe that is specifically for those headphones that we use between each student. So I would probably refer that back to the campus and with the teacher's input on how they manage that.
Okay. The next agenda item is from a variety of SHAC presenters. So at our last SHAC meeting, we had a lot of subcommittees get to work, and most of the subcommittees have had a meeting and have a plan in place. Each of them have established a chair to help guide the process for the remainder of the SHAC year. The bylaws committee was kind of slim, but there's the couple of us that were on the bylaws committee. I am am chairing that one, and there wasn't much that bubbled up on bylaws to address right at present. So if there's concerns about the bylaws or things we think need to be amended, we can address those at a later time. But right now, I'm trying to think, do you have anything to add? So that's really a short report from bylaws right now. So moving right along, compliance updates.
Okay, compliance. So you guys will recall at our last SHAC meeting, we talked about Texas Education Code, Section I, that has an expiry date of August 1st of this year. We voted and agreed that we would recommend to the board on behalf of SHAC that we make our current opt-in policy, or our current opt-in process policy. And so that was presented to the board at the last meeting, and that passed unanimously. And so my understanding of the next steps now is that the board will go off and draft the language for the policy that will be presented at the next meeting. And then there's another month taken to allow for public comment and any feedback, and then it's voted on. So there's a couple months. So hopefully within a couple months, we should have clarity on what that looks like. But like I said, they did vote to unanimously to approve our recommendation. As far as compliance, we had a subcommittee meeting last week, and we reviewed the tracker. It was included in your attachments as well as a paper copy here. I won't go through all of it, but it just gives you a flavor of what this subcommittee is looking at. And so for each, the purpose of the tracker was to take Texas Education Code and break it down into actual actionable steps that our SHAC is responsible for. And some of these have an annual expectation for us, as well as some of them don't necessarily have a time frame assigned, but it's just topics that we are meant to address as we have the ability to. And so we went through line by line, and you'll see we used a color-coded, like a stop sign or a stoplight for green, yellow, and red. I think in general, we're in pretty good shape as far as compliance goes. You'll see a lot of green, and a lot of the yellows are in progress for the year. And so some of the things that our committee has agreed to work on, one of the languages for opioids, and so I'll just kind of read it for you. Appropriate grade levels and curriculum for instruction regarding the dangers of opioids, including instruction on A, opioid addiction and abuse, including addiction to and abuse of synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, and B, methods of administering an opioid antagonist. And so we agreed that we were going to work on this and collect data. Dr. Upshaw shared some that the district had received from Texas DSHS, and we'll be looking at local resources that we can tap into and supplement the things that we're already doing within the district regarding opioids. So that's that one. We also want to take a similar approach to vaping. While vaping is not necessarily addressed in Texas Education Code specifically, I think we know, and Officer Blakelock had mentioned, as well as I think Dr. Povich in one of the last SHAC meetings, that vaping is a known problem on the campuses, and the number of vaping incidents has ticked up over recent years. And so we plan to take a similar approach to vaping, find some data, look at it, tap into hopefully local medical, as well as other resources, and just see how we can supplement what we're already doing within the district regarding vaping. And then the last one that we talked about was daily recess for K through 8th. And so the Texas Education Code states SHAC policy recommendations on daily recess and physical activity and fitness. And so we've asked Mr. Haymark to provide data for SHAC consideration by campus for our K through 8 campuses on the minutes of recess, as well as PE daily for the students, and for us to consider, because I know, at least in my own kiddos' experience, that varies quite a bit by campuses. Campuses as far as elementary, obviously through high school, but also within elementaries, from elementary to elementary, or intermediate to intermediate. And so just understanding if we are happy with those, or what we feel like, based on other research in terms of what, it's recommended for students to have. So those are the three areas that we, as a subcommittee, had agreed upon to try to focus on. You can see there's a long list, lots of options to choose from. Any questions on subcommittee for compliance? I think we'll probably meet again in a few weeks. I think we'll be in a position to come back and regroup. The next one's also mine for membership. This is a much easier update. We did not meet, given that most of our membership activities are in the spring and summer. And I know a lot of people are serving on multiple subcommittees, and they've been busy over the last couple of weeks. So we did not meet as a membership committee, but we'll probably kick that off maybe in February with a Zoom meeting as well. And the other thing I would add is I think there's been, I also sit in on the mental health subcommittee, and I'll just say in general, there's been a lot of enthusiasm on the subcommittees, and it's been very encouraging to see the interest and the volunteering and things. So thanks to everybody that's trying to get involved and is getting involved. Appreciate it.
Oh. Right. I am the subcommittee chair for mental health, and we had our first meeting, and we kind of broke it into different subcommittees for mental health. If you want to look up, we have girls in academic success, and that one's focused on how girls could be worked with more, supported more to get them more into the STEM programs, better math scores. We've had some really good data coming from some of our employees already on that. That one, I do not think the next meeting has been established, but Jennifer Blackman is the chair if you want to reach out. We also have a staff well-being committee, and it's myself, Jennifer Blackman. We've also added Dr. Klepesky and Krista Cascio. I don't know if I say her name right. On the staff well-being committee, just kind of focusing on how we can support our staff so that they feel supported, which in turn contributes to student success. And then we have bullying, which is being headed by Dr. Spear. Just kind of how bullying can be prevented, recorded, so on. I don't think you guys have established your meeting date, have you?
No, I emailed with Raleigh, or Dr. Shalla and Ms. Davey today, so we're teasing out times, but we're on the way. Okay. Thank you.
And then suicide and anxiety is a very large committee in terms of what will be covered. That includes testing anxiety, general anxiety, suicide prevention. A lot of interest in that one, and it is being headed by Lindsay Taylor. And then also divorce support for students that are going through a divorce and how they could be supported, and that is being headed by April Heron. So, and we are still open if anybody wants to drop in to any of the meetings or reach out to any of those subcommittee chairs. You're welcome to.
Thank you.
So on this particular committee, we have not met yet. We're working in the process of organizing our first meeting. So that's our update as of now. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Amber Dunnigan. I'm the parent representative for the Physical Fitness and Activity Subcommittee. We met to review expectations and goals of ways to best support all students, staff, and community within Conroe ISD. The subcommittee reviewed the provided list of best practices utilized within Conroe ISD Physical Education Department. Currently, the subcommittee has a goal to update and ensure those best practices are utilized to its full potential, as well as evaluate their continued relevance and/or expansion if needed. We will continue to look at previous mentioned 2023-2024 goals, as well as any that's brought to the table in the future. And then please let us know if you have any comments, questions, concerns, or encouraging thoughts. Thank you.
So we just wanted to touch briefly on SHAC communication. So just as a gentle reminder, communications that go towards myself or Dr. Upshaw, if you could just please CC both of us. We love the activity and the energy, but it's a lot of emails, and so it helps us stay on track when both of us are emailed and making sure that we're not missing anything. It helps us work better together. For subcommittee communication, this one popped up at the request of Ms. Blackman, so I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that.
Hi, can you hear me? I just wanted to say I was impressed at the last SHAC meeting about everyone speaking about how much more transparent it had become. And I noticed, I'm interested in all of the subcommittees, but I just don't have the time to be on all the subcommittees. And I was hoping that perhaps I could make a motion to actually have record of what happens at the subcommittees, either via minutes and possibly, I know a lot of them are done via Zoom, that we could record the Zoom and that be made available to the public, just so that more of the details about where these things are getting decided is available to the public. So I'd like to make that motion today.
Are there any seconds for that motion? Okay. And then also, can we just have a quorum check, please? So 50% of parents or members are present, and then 51% of the members present are parents. But we can still have a discussion. So we have a motion, we have a second, and we'll open it for discussion and comments. Oh, sure. So I think a little historical context would be helpful right now. So last year, the SHAC had the subcommittees come up, and we worked together. The expectation at present from the subcommittees and the subcommittee chairs are aware that when you have a meeting, we want a report back to the full SHAC committee about what topics were discussed, what's the plan in place, how do we move forward with any ideas. And to be clear, the subcommittee of itself is really the work group. They have no authority outside of the subcommittee to act on, do, like, say, go to the board. Like, everything that the subcommittee is working on comes back to the full SHAC. So there's in no way any actions that come, for a policy change or recommendation that doesn't come back through the full SHAC. So at present, the expectation is that there is a report from the meetings and that whatever recommendation that group has come up with comes back to the full SHAC for presentation. Other comments?
So I missed the first subcommittee meetings probably through my own mistake. So I really appreciate people getting back to me and letting me on those last minute. But I did want to say that the follow-up email from the compliance one had a wonderful little summary with it and everything. If we got something that was that detailed, I would feel pretty comfortable. I mean, I'd love the luxury of I missed out on something, I'd like to watch the videotape of it. That would be great if we could do that. But if not, I don't know if there's like a template that you might be able to make out, and I know that's a whole lot to ask of you, but I just thought that was a really thorough presentation for me, and I felt like I kind of got the gist of what had been going on. So I did want to offer that was a really great example of when you're not there, how you can get filled in with it.
Thank you. I'm happy to share the template. It's really just kind of those key items that were discussed, and then primarily the action items. So I appreciate knowing that it gave you a good sense of what we talked about. I think, as Dr. Spear said, sending out the minutes, I think, is very helpful. I know it's helpful to have that list of action items to go back to, and it's also the starting point for the next meeting to say, okay, this is where you left off. Let's go through and just see where we're at with regard to the checklist of items that we agreed to do. So I'm very supportive of having an action item list, the minutes out. As far as Zooms, I can say in my own experience or my own opinion, I don't like to be videotaped. And so even these meetings, right? I mean, you kind of have to think about what you're saying because this is public. And so I feel like in a Zoom meeting, it's nice that it's a workspace and you can comfortably say things and exchange ideas. I think about, for example, our mental health subcommittee last year. Mm-hmm. If you think about those of you that were on that one, how much changed over the course of those meetings. We started and we were coming from all different places, and by the end we aligned on an aligned approach. But had anyone, kind of just popped in and watched one of those meetings at any point, we would have looked like a hot mess. And maybe we were, but I think allowing those committees to do the work and then come and report out. And certainly, just to reiterate, everyone's able to come to any subcommittee meetings at any time. So it's not like the roster's set. You can come at any point. I think that's helpful to allow those to work and then present things out to full SHAC. So I'm all for the minutes and sharing those more broadly throughout SHAC if that's helpful. But as far as recording and posting the Zooms, I prefer not to do those.
So I'd like to just give some feedback, just for us to think as a thinking space about what's been put out for discussion, just so there's clarity amongst the group. So when you look at what we're required to do for SHAC meetings, what it says in statute is our district's required to post minutes and audio or video recordings of SHAC meetings. And the answer to that from the state is yes, in accordance with changes made by HB 1525, the 87th Texas legislature. Regular sessions requires the school district to post the minutes like we do within the 10th day, and then an audio or video recording on the district internet's website. So it could be an audio or a video recording. Last year there was conversation between Mr. Haymark, Dr. Spear, and our communications wonderful executive director over there that helps make this happen. There was a choice to make it live stream, so that because there was parents that couldn't make it, but they still wanted to hear it, even though they weren't here to vote. They still wanted to be a part of that, and we could live stream it to the district. It's not required to do that. So I just want to share that openly with everybody. What most districts in our counterpart that we compare ourselves to do an audio recording, and then they put the audio recording. So we just want to just share with everybody that's not required, right? What required is just either audio or video. We go above and beyond. And then it asks, is the recording required for all the work of the SHAC? Within that question on this information, it says the recording and the posting of the minutes and videos only applies to the full SHAC committee. That means the actual committee that comes together and votes. Earlier in the year, last year, when we were having this discussion, we had kind of tossed around, and well, maybe I tossed around in my mind by itself, was that wouldn't it be great that when we sent out the SHAC agenda, what came with that was all the subcommittee reports. In my wildest dreams, if they came true, it would be the agenda, all the we could get ourselves organized. Right? That way is that the agenda, the SHAC minutes from the last time, all the artifacts that are going to be brought today for you to review, but then also all the minutes, this template that I'm hearing that each one of you that's a chair shares it. And when we're required to post 72 hours in advance, that's what we are committed to do, not only post it, but send that to you with more than that time to review that work. That keeps us transparent and everybody in line that we can offer. Another thing we could offer is that when are the SHAC subcommittee meetings? So we could offer just a template that we send you and says, look, this is when, if Mary Ann's leading this subcommittee, then she shares they have access to it and they can tell us when the next Zoom meeting is, and then April's leading that one and Amber's leading another one, and whoever happens to be, and that's something you have that at any time, if you have the time to log in as a group, but that keeps it with the internal piece of us working together collectively as that working group. Those are just thoughts that I've thought of when, Ms. Blackman reached out to us and say, hey, because we can't be at all those meetings. We have to divide and conquer ourselves. So those are just some thoughts for you to consider, but also what is required and not required. Just offering that to the group.
I have a question. I'm speaking about the subcommittees. When you say subcommittee, is it, bylaws, compliance, membership, and so on, or is it also the little bitty one, like the anxiety, the bullying? I mean, are those yourself on the girls' academic success? When you're saying you want notes or minutes, is it on all of the smaller ones as well, or the general one, like mental health? Well, I'm personally happy to do minutes on the subgroup as well, but I mean, I guess that's open for discussion as well. If there's going to be minutes attached to the posting that's done 72 hours in advance, that's open to the public, then I think that satisfies, the information. If that's being posted together on the web, is that all being posted on the website? That 72-hour ahead thing?
The web.
The slides for the meeting?
Yes. No, I mean, I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood, but I thought you said you had to send everything 72 hours in advance. And that gets posted on the website, or no?
Yes. What we're required to do is, we're required to post the agenda. And so we're not required to post, we have chosen to, as a leadership group, to post this PowerPoint up. And that's us trying to get organized, because as we started, it literally was like 15 attachments to the website. So what we've done is create this structure, so then our committee chairs can report to us. But only required is the actual minutes, and anything shared here we can put on the website for folks. But what I think I'm trying to refer to is what we could commit to is when we send you the required agenda and any artifacts that we're going to discuss today so you can review, if we want to do a template, then that's not required to go on the website, but then that updates everybody on the girls' academic success, or if Marianne, not that I'm giving you work, Marianne, but Marianne kind of has where she organizes all that. Everybody reports it to her. She sends it to us. We include the attachments. Does that make sense? So that we know what all the people in mental health are doing, the physical activity and wellness group, so everybody can see it, and that's transparent that way. That is not required to be put on the website.
One of the things to April said that I thought was a good point is, in essence, the subcommittees are think tanks who we are relying on to kind of, in the creative process, spitball some ideas and that sort of thing. And so a lot of it will end up on the cutting room floor. And, to me, what they're bringing is, the polished work, which y'all did a superb job on that. So anyway, so I'm confused as the need to have minutes for the subcommittees when they're bringing us, in essence, the summary of what they worked on. So, thank you.
Sorry, I just have a question, and I think part of the reason, I would like to see that transparency, have those minutes. Can a subcommittee, on an action item, does it have to come before SHAC, or can they act on something without bringing it back to SHAC?
You mean like a work item, or like?
Yeah, if there was within the subcommittee, hey, we think we should do this, can they move forward with doing something or taking action on behalf of that SHAC subcommittee, or does it need to be brought back to the full committee before something goes out? Because I think that might lend to some of the want for additional transparency is that decision-making process and how those actions take place.
Yeah, I think it depends on, on what the item is. So, as SHAC members, we're all here because we bring a lens that is unique to our position, whether it's a parent or a district employee or a community member. We all come with this background that helps us provide that 360 view, which is intended for this SHAC to represent as appointed people by the board. So I preface it with that because I think it depends on what the action item is. So if it's like, go get more information, it would really be difficult to get any work done if it was something that had to go back to the SHAC and say, hey, I'll motion to make, my bylaw subcommittee research DSHS or whatever, and so I think it depends on what the action item would be. If it's output in regard to recommendation for policy changes that fall within the purview of what the SHAC is asked to do legislatively, that would be a hard stop. Any output that is legislatively mandated from the SHAC needs to come from the full SHAC. The work groups are going to have homework, and I don't think that homework necessarily needs to come back to the SHAC to get permission to do your homework. I will remind everyone on the SHAC that we do have a code of conduct in the bylaws, and everyone's expected to conduct themselves professionally and kindly and favorably in the community when it comes to SHAC business and SHAC interactions. So whatever the homework may be, I just want to drop that as a gentle reminder to please be kind.
I'll give a couple examples that may speak to your question. So, for example, anything that's outward facing from the SHAC that leaves this room on behalf and represents a SHAC recommendation would have to come before SHAC and have to have approval. So that cannot be made in a subcommittee. Anything that's internal to SHAC can be made in subcommittees, and it's kind of the homework that she's talking about. For example, in our compliance subcommittee meeting, we had about 30 options of what we could have worked on this year, right? And so we talked about as a subcommittee,
where's our focus, where's the need, and we made those decisions. That is not something that requires full shack because we're the ones who have joined and are volunteering the time and energy to put into the compliance subcommittee. That said, if there's an item that anyone within full shack feels like, hey, this is really important, we need to address, that's always available for you to come in and say, I don't know which subcommittee this goes to, but we need to talk about X, Y, Z topic. So I think one easy way to think about it is anything outward facing from shack would have to come before a full shack. Anything internal to the subcommittee can be handled by the subcommittee with the report outs that we're talking about. And I do think it seems very reasonable that we can have a template that we all use for each subcommittee. So we have, 6 slides that just says, here's the high level things that we're working on, here's the status, any key updates. I mean, I'm fine with doing that for mine. I think that's fine. If that helps people be engaged and come to the meeting more prepared to ask questions or whatever, I think that's fine.
Do we have quorum for a vote? Oh, sorry. Anybody else with comments? Yes. Oh. Okay.
If we're going to do the motion, does it include the calendar thing where we know where, whenever all the subcommittees are meeting too, or is that like a separate? Because I liked that idea.
Right. Your motion on the table right now is to record every. I think it was to record every meeting, right?
To record
Yeah.
and to have minutes, that was the motion? Okay, so that's we have
If-
to vote on.
I understand why the recordings would be something that people feel uncomfortable with. If it's just having minutes and you want me to adjust my motion or withdraw the motion and put a new motion for just minutes, I'm not sure what the appropriate Robert's rule is for how to adjust a motion that's already on the table and seconded. But I understand, and I am willing to change the motion to take away the video portion of it, which I feel like is.
So then you would amend the motion.
Okay, I'll amend. I would make a motion to amend my motion.
Yes, very good.
To just have the minutes summarize the main subcommittee's meetings.
Now we can
Yeah.
vote. Yes.
Do we have to second that?
To second that one.
Second.
So second to the amendment. So the motion on the table, to be clear, is that subcommittees will produce minutes out to the full shack so that people can stay up to date on what is happening at the subcommittees. Okay. Yes. Oh.
Was that, yeah. Really good. I was just going to
I was just a little confused. Does the minutes go out to just the shack or to the public?
They go to the shack. At present, the subcommittee meeting minutes are not required by law to be posted on the shack website. So this would be something internal to the shack that we would share.
But to clarify to the group, as we're further discussing this, is that's what we do here, is every agenda has the subcommittee reports. So then what Sam helps us with as our secretary, in the minutes, there's a summarization of the other work, that it would be public. Does that make sense? That's how we've tried to organize ourselves.
Okay. And then are we at quorum, Sam?
I have a comment. Just a question. I understand the idea that recording and having it posted publicly particularly can be a little bit intimidating. I feel the same way. No, maybe that's the wrong word, but I'm wondering if there is, just trying to think of it from both angles and all directions, if there would be a downside to just recording the meetings and putting them in like a central spreadsheet to have for reference if we want to look at that later, to hit the record on a Zoom and have it. I know I don't know what the legal side to that is, but just to have it for reference, and then we don't send that out, but we have the minutes. Would there be any benefit to that so that we have that historically?
I think that would be very obtrusive, labor intensive, You know, it's something that we're, just like this gentleman was saying, when you're in the subcommittees, you're spitting all kinds of stuff, and you're going to come out with, when you're throwing this much stuff out, you're going to come out with this much stuff. And that's the important stuff. All that other stuff just needs to go away. And we don't need to catalog it and waste the time and energy to do all that other stuff. That's my feelings on it.
I feel like there's also some logistics. When I worked for the district, I know I was able to record Zoom, and those were able to be kept. I've had a personal Zoom account for another business I'm with, and it does not, like, you have to pay for a subscription. So if we have subcommittee leaders leading these from their homes, I don't know that they would be able to, would we have to log in for the district, or, how the logistics would be on that.
So for quorum, we need 50% of the members present, and then 51% of parents present. 51% of those members have to be present. Oh, yes, sir. Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia.
We're glad we're
Yes.
on our committee.
Yay. Okay. Any further comments before we vote? Okay, so all in favor for minutes output of the subcommittees to be shared with the full SHAC, but not with on the public website. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right. Don't leave them up. Okay, abstentions? And nays? One abstention? Two abstentions? Two abstentions. All right, so motion passes.
I do want to ask, if you don't mind. I do want to just encourage us, and I want to thank Ms. Blackman for just reaching out and being vulnerable and asking if we could have this conversation. I think the more we're open about how we're going to work together, I think the more productive we're going to become. So it's okay. We need to talk about it, how we're going to do the work, because I think everybody's heart is in the right place to do great things for our kids. And we just got to get through this hump of, what does that work look like? And then what are the rules, right? What are the parameters? I think, April, you made a really good statement that if it's representing the SHAC outwardly, we need to bring it back to the group, right? It's one thing if you're doing it small, but I think that's a key point right there. Because we all need, wait, what? What went out? Like, we all need to know. And so we're only going to get better, we discuss it, right? Even though sometimes this is uncomfortable as we grow in leadership and grow in this capacity, but I think it'll make us better. So thank you, Ms. Blackman, for that. I appreciate it.
How about the calendar part?
How about the calendar?
Remember, we said if we could just do a template when they...
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can make a motion for sure for it. The other part is that it's in the minutes, too. And so if you'd like to make a motion to have a calendar present for that, that's totally fine. We also really want to do the best thing for the group. And so I think that's a good best practice, even if we didn't make a motion for it, but I'm happy to entertain any motions. And I do not want to minimize any of the effort.
So you're asking for like a real time, what are the forward-looking meetings for the subcommittees, right?
Yes.
Right, so just from a logistics perspective, those change and move around a lot. So I think we would need, instead of trying to email every time to everyone, that's exhaustive. I think we would need a document where we just update as things happen with the Zoom links and times and the dates. And that's, if we do it, I think that's the only reasonable way to do it. Otherwise, we're going to have people saying, I thought we were meeting, we're not meeting. It's very confusing. So I think that we would need like a repository for where we have those meetings. And the time, date, location, all the relevant details, dial-in details.
At present, I don't know that we have a clear solution to make that happen. I'm not saying it can't be done. I think it's worth the discussion, but I'm trying to think logistically, where is it stored? How do we get a link to everybody? Who's responsible for maintaining it? I think it's a really good idea, though. What? It is a lot of work.
Bryce, can we do a Google Calendar?
Google's not my friend.
for you, right? Not for like 50 other, or however many, because there's so many people.
Yeah.
And they're all, we're dividing the conference, right? Like, we all can't be on every committee. I mean, we could, I guess, but.
Oh, I assumed that the subcommittees would still schedule like normal, and then they would just send out, like, let's say that you've decided that your subcommittee is going to meet tomorrow at 3, and so then we would all be able to either check that database or get that email, which I do agree kind of seems clunky, or whatever that solution may be, which probably does need some further discussion there. And then we would know, oh, okay, if I want to join in to watch, to kind of see what's going on, hey, I have something pertinent to that because I noticed that this is what they might be covering. So let me jump in there and do something with that.
Is it reasonable, as a shack, do you think it's reasonable for us to kind of troubleshoot some ideas that might work, and then we can just try them out and see what works? I don't know that we're going to solve it immediately. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess in the interim, if you have a specific subcommittee, or if you want to be on all of them, then let us know, and we can add you to the distribution. I think
Yeah.
that's the short-term fix, and if there's still a need after that happens, I think we revisit and see if a different solution is necessary.
All right. Any other comments? Okay. And then the last piece of shack communication, we just wanted to let you know that the output that comes, we had the opt-in piece that went before the board and it passed unanimously. The pieces that come out of the shack that we don't necessarily, like the policy that went along with that and the things that coordinated that administratively, we don't necessarily go over all those pieces. And so making sure that Dr. Upshaw and I are holding ourselves accountable to each other to be aligned when that goes before the board. We just want to let you know that we are working on that on our end so that, if you have to make, a game time decision, and just determine like, which policy is going to go as had to happen with the last opt-in thing, that we're on the same page. So we just want to hold ourselves accountable to you all, that is a process that we are doing too. Okay? Yes, sir.
I don't know if now is a good time to ask this question, but it kind of does fall under communication. Is that, I don't know, this may come across very complicated, but I guess the gist of it, my question is as a shack member, who do I go to for information if I need whatever information I might be curious about to work on in the shack? So let's take like vaping, for instance. If I wanted to get vaping statistics or vaping data or pick your type of data, who should I bother? Because I don't want to be, I don't want to pester one person and then they send me to the next and the next and the next, or what are our resources for getting information, and who should we be talking to in general as parent members on the shack? And who's our first kind of go-to for most of that, or who should it be?
If it's you want to take it?
I was going to say, so generally, if it falls under a certain subcommittee, I would say go to that subcommittee lead and have that discussion. But generally, any data I've ever requested, I go through our district liaison, which is Dr. Upshaw, and then so that we don't have lots of fingers out in the district, right? She's our point of contact to the district, and then she goes as necessary and engages who she needs to get the relevant data.
Okay.
So that's been our process in the past. I think it's worked pretty well.
In particular to that one, and I'm not saying it's this one, but maybe you're doing it as an example. If that is of your interest, the compliance group has that data, is working on it. So that would be the group. But I could be the person, or I could say, well, that would be this person and connect you to that. I mean, I could try to do my best, but if it's not my department or my realm, I'm not going to speak to it. But I could connect you with, well, that's Barbara Robertson, or that would be Robin Hughes if it's nutritious. I could help connect you with that individual. Obviously, whether it's formalized to the shack or just as a parent. Outside of that, if you need anything, I can help you.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Do it right. And this kind of was part of my question earlier, and I'm a former teacher, which I know several others in this room are as well. But there was a survey online, and then I had some friends that still work in the district kind of reach out, hey, you're on shack, do you know anything about this? Kind of questions, took a look at it, and again, I am a former teacher, I do a lot of educational research in my new position since I've left Conroe, and did look at it, and I'll be honest, I was kind of concerned. And I think there was very good intent in wanting to get that information from teachers. I think there are a lot of organizations, you know, the Charles Butt Foundation does one every year, and there's lots of good statewide data, and I think there is a need to get some more data. But I also see and this was kind of my question about like how much can a subcommittee do? I think there was some maybe confusion on, is this part of Conroe ISD? Is Conroe asking for this information? Is SHAC asking for this information? Like, where is it going to go if I report certain things? And I think for some teachers, you know, depending on where they are in their career, knowing what you can and cannot maybe share out and who gets to see it, what happens with this data. And so I think, I don't know if that would fall under communication, but like maybe having those conversations, because again, that was kind of my thought earlier, is I know that was a subcommittee thing, and I think that's a great idea to look into, but maybe the how-to, I would love to be on more committees, and as someone said earlier, I think Jennifer maybe said, I would love to be on more committees but can't, but that would be something that maybe that conversation could happen as a committee, because I do think there is a way to collect that data, but having gone through, you know, my dissertation process, and I had to work with districts and get permission to do certain things, I think there is kind of maybe a process we could use to get a little bit more validity so we can collect that data that we need, but find maybe a way to do it. And so I don't know how that fits in this conversation, but that was something I did want to bring up tonight, just maybe how we can address that, or how we can still collect that, but still also maybe follow some of those internal district procedures and processes for collecting that data.
Yeah, you know, so I see this from a lot of different angles, and I think the first thing that everyone needs to do, because this has bubbled up on my radar and on her radar, but as a co-chair and as a person that was present in the meeting, and there was a handful of other folks that were here at that meeting, so I mentioned before, one of our roles as appointees on this council is to bring forth our network, our, touch points in the community. And so we get those from a lot of different places. And I think that the backlash that has fallen from that survey has lacked content and context. So the reality of that situation was that there was one parent who volunteered to help with staff wellness at that meeting, just one. And so that person took the lead to try to figure out, well, where do I start on a big topic like this, and was just trying to figure out what would bubble up. And so I find it appalling to see the scrutiny that's being applied to a single parent volunteer to try to do something to help our staff. 0 people at that meeting besides a single parent volunteered to step in and lean in and help the district employees with staff wellness, which was the heart of the matter. And so I think the framing for the intent of that is missing, and whether it could have been done better or not, the question at hand is what's the intent, and the intent was good. Subsequently, we've had other people jump on and be willing to help with staff wellness, but in that moment, it was just one person. And so we are all volunteers here, volunteer, employees, volunteer parents. And so it's discouraging when you're trying to do something that's good for good output to have a backlash come at when the intent was good in the first place. And the SHAC, we don't have access to all of the resources that the district has. And the scrutiny that's applied to surveys and data taking, fine. But when you present the data you have from a scientific method perspective, you look at the benefits and drawbacks of the way the data was collected, and that's something that you just present very transparently when you present data. And so, regarding the survey and whether it was well received or not well received, I think it's important to know that that was the only person trying to help with staff wellness, and that's a really important thing to make sure that that framing and that context is there. And we don't have other platforms right now. There is something that has bubbled up because of it, the thought exchange, which is something that is an option. But to be clear, SHAC members can get information from wherever you want to get it. Like, is the information I bring because it came from 4 parents in my neighborhood, is it any less valid or of less merit because I didn't talk to every single parent in Conroe ISD? No, because we're all here to bringing forth our angle of whatever it is that we see every day. And I think that really, I mean, that needs to be under consideration every single time, and applying appropriate standards and appropriate lenses to situations is really, really important, and grace is good.
Sorry, just to be clear, that's all well and good, and I was not criticizing the person or any of that. That was just my thought of if it had come from that subcommittee to the full committee, maybe we could have had that conversation about to prevent some of that backlash, like how we could approach it. I am not criticizing an individual or anything in that regard, just the method of collection, and maybe if it had come back to full committee, that is something we could have addressed, or maybe we could have, and still could. Like, I don't think the boat has sailed, right? Like, we still want that information and can still work towards gathering it. That was my question, was more the how we do it.
So there is something to, and sometimes with best laid out plans, and with best intent, we go, oh, well, lessons learned, right? We are, as a district, working through this new software that is called Thought Exchange. If you think about our experience with the cell phone committee and the open-ended answers, we don't have a research department in Conroe ISD, just like the Shack doesn't have a research department, right? And so you're looking at it. For the people that, do calendar, or the people that you're the one interpreting 10,000 comments. And so we've looked at how we can simplify that process to get us, look, these are the 3 actionables. And so Ms. Blakelock and her team have looked at this particular software. And so as this bubbles up, as we move forward, there is an option that I'm getting trained in that's quick and easy, that could be a quick thing that we could show. And it's an easy, it would replace SurveyMonkey, but we've looked at it. It's really interesting how it works. So maybe a thought could be is if your subcommittee is interested in doing something like that, as you have those conversations, shoot me an email and I will log in with you and say, hey, look, this is something we could use. Is this an option in how you want to move forward? Because I think that's one thing we quickly went, well, we are looking into something. Maybe as we move forward, we can offer that also to the Shack. Because I do think, in our experience with the surveys that went out, multiple surveys about cell phone, there's a lot of interpretation to how you ask questions, right? But this really, and how do you take 11,000 comments and then give actionables to that committee? I think that's going to help us because it has a lot of AI in it, and it just kind of automatically pops that out. It's a beautiful thing, y'all. So as we move forward, it's just something that we could work on.
Okay, sorry. The only thing, as I was listening to your points that you made as well, and of course, Dr. Spear, like you said too, the intent is wonderful and it's coming from a good place. When we were discussing anything, say if something is communicated on behalf of Shack with the Shack name on it, like a posting of something attached to Shack in some way through social media, I took that conversation to mean that anything like that going forward we would bring back sort of before, or at least run up the flagpole to Dr. Upshaw and Dr. Spear before we posted it, since it would be something that was communication with the Shack name attached, just going forward, like a learning thing from something new to just keep in mind. That was how I understood that, so I just wanted to see if that was sort of what we were saying. Anything that's posted or anything, with the Shack name attached to it coming from or held out as related to Shack. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think that's a good idea. I would just hesitate to make us come before full Shack, because full Shack meets 4 or 5 times a year, and so you would be limited in your subcommittee waiting, but I think it's a great idea to bring it to the chairs.
Yeah, we can help them.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next, click.
Okay, bullying update. Okay, so at our last Shack meeting, we had asked for any items that we could bring up to you. And one of the things that was expressed by our committee was providing us more information as a group on what are the procedures and processes with bullying in our school district. So there was a couple of artifacts that Dr. Spear sent the team on, the council. I keep thinking we're like the team, that we work here at the school district. about bullying, and there were a couple of processes and procedures that were shared. So just to kind of give you a background, when we look at bullying or any kind of sexual harassment in the district, there's two types of pieces to this in my head, right? There's the piece of the education, right? Bully prevention and being aware, and just as a committee, one of the things we worked on last year and the years past was that awareness of that dating violence and sexual harassment and that curriculum, all that kind of stuff. There's the education part of it, and then there's the administrative part of it, which is the investigation piece, right? And then what happens if there is an incident, and how do we move forward? So the area or the department in our school district that oversees the education part of it would be our guidance and counseling department. That's under the direction of Dr. Tamika Taylor. Lindsay Taylor, which is on our committee, helps us with that. And also our other coordinators of guidance and counseling and other members on her team. So if there is a need to have additional information to, like, what do we do for prevention, that would be something that we could bring them back to give you more information to build that awareness around the team. So when there's on the administrative side of it, that means once there's an incident, now what do we do? Which are some of these flow charts that were shared. That would be, we have experience in personnel here now, right? All our principals that are sitting on the team, this is what they're very well aware of. If there's a situation, then how is that protocol? So what we wanted just to do is provide you that information and then ask if there's any follow-up questions or any further time that we want to have a discussion on this council moving forward. So are there any questions?
I had a few questions, but I'll try to keep them limited. So I had requested, I think maybe I don't know if my request is what started this or is multiple requests, but I appreciate the information that's provided. I guess what I was trying to get at is more of the interaction between the parents. So the administrative process goes through. Where's the communication back to the parents in that? And where is that interplay with the victim's parents? Not necessarily the perpetrator, but on the victim's side. So that was one of them. Was like, so, you make a report or make a complaint, and then it just kind of goes off into the ether almost, and it never really comes back to the victim. And so it lends itself to conspiracy theories or feelings of, no one cares. Pick your the feeling, but that's kind of where it comes back to, and. So understanding this process and where the parents should be involved or could be involved might improve that as well. But also, when you read through this policy, is this only apply to other students, or is it also apply to staff? So if a student is, let's say, a victim of bullying or harassment by a staff member, where do they fall into this, and where does that handle as well? Because that does happen, occasionally, and it doesn't seem to be, and I'm not casting dispersion towards the CISD Police Department, but their staff as well, and they don't necessarily have to answer to the parent about how they handle things. And so if they're the ones who are supposed to be investigating another staff member for one of these items, how do we know it's independent? Where does that independence come in? How do we know it's being handled? Because, if they don't want to do anything about something, there's no other legal or no other law enforcement agency you can go to if it happens on campus. And so I don't want to get too nebulous with the questioning, but, that's kind of some of the answers I was kind of looking towards is where do we fill these holes, and, especially with the parental involvement and the parental feedback.
So I'd like to, it's been about 15 years since I've been a campus principal. And so I want to just give an opportunity for our principals when you work through these situations. Can you help provide some clarification on, because what was also important is that there's a process and protocol, but every situation is an individual situation, right? So it's just not blanket. So I just want to if you have any insight to some of the questions that Mr. Maddox is asking about students, and then if there's any follow-up for staff, I'd like to hand it over.
So, Brent, to talk to you about the staff to student harassment, I would think first that the parent would contact the campus principal, and the campus principal would follow up, do the investigation, and then protocol would be us to get back with the parent. That would be campus protocol and district protocol. Are you not asking that?
No, I mean, that's pretty direct, kind of what I'm asking is. So So if we do go to the principal, though, then where does it fall? I mean, so if the principal doesn't do anything about it, and then let's say we go to Gladys's office or to CISD, the police department, where does it, there's no structure here for necessarily for how it gets resolved.
Well, there's definitely policy in the district that if you have a concern, there is a concern form, a complaint form that you can file that would go to the superintendent's office and the assistant superintendents, so then it would be addressed for sure. For example, if you felt like something was not addressed to your liking, that's what a parent tends to do.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean,
like, maybe stop being nebulous, like maybe speak.
I could give you a very specific example. I mean, I don't know if we want to do that, or, I mean, I think a very specific example is a complaint got filed with the Department of Education, and the evening, or the afternoon that the investigator stated that she contacted the school, the person who answered the phone at the school's, adult child vandalized the house of the complainee. And, charges were filed through the sheriff's department, but the Conroe ISD police department said, oh, we don't see any connection. And so in this process, where does that fall? So those would be the case examples. I mean, we could go over other ones.
Well, in that case, what you're explaining to me, that to me would be, my recommendation would be the stay away agreement between those two kids, which.
But when it's a staff member.
But you said a child vandalized.
No, the adult. The staff member's adult child. Adult, yeah, so it was an adult.
Okay.
There's the staff members,
Maybe that's above my pay grade.
I know, that's what, yeah, so there's lots of case studies we could go through, I mean, case examples we could use. And I guess what I'm looking for is, how does a parent know in these processes when it's succeeding, when it's failing, when nothing can be done, when something can be done? Yeah, it's, like, I mean, I call it nebulous. I mean, these algorithms, they make sense, but they're also nebulous because they don't apply to each individual case, but they apply to the broad, category. And so how do you make it more clear and more transparent to a parent as to what's going on with the process?
I think, we definitely make a concerted team effort to keep the lines of communication open whenever a bullying report is made to us at our campus. So in order to avoid the feeling of a parent, or in order to avoid having parents feel like something's being swept under the rug or nothing's done, we always follow up. So we always let the parents know the steps that we took, who we communicated with. We communicated with the student who is accused of bullying, with their parents. It's just a frequent line of communication. We always make an effort to follow back up with the parents.
Yeah, and that's what you'd always hope that it would be the case, right? The communication would be there. I guess the reason why I bring it up at SHAC in general is that if you go online, you can see a lot of parents complaining, about the process, whatever we want to call that process, about how a response is made to a victim or the victim's family. And you can't speak to those details because we don't know them. But I've had personal experience, with a couple of different cases where things weren't handled well. I mean, from a parent's perspective. And so I can look over the online complaints that we don't know the details of and say, yeah, I've seen that too. And so that's why I kind of bring up some of these cases is that, it's like, you have a perpetrator with the stay away agreement, let's say, but it doesn't follow into the next campus. And so in the next campus, the perpetrator gets sat by seating chart right next to the victim. And I know that happening more than once. And so it's like, well, where does that address, and that's just a case point again, and this is and these algorithms are not meant to talk to a specific case, but how do we communicate to the parent and make sure that the parent is satisfied isn't the right way of putting it, but that they're assured that the school district is taking this seriously, they're taking appropriate action to prevent future, because a bullying happens or harassment happens, and you can't retroactively prevent it. And the whole point of, I think, these processes is prevent it from reoccurring.
Yep.
right? So that's where I guess, so how do we help that from a parent's perspective to understand that it's actually working?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say at this point, I don't know if there's a specific process that we have in place that would
Well, I
go
was
from
gonna-
one year to the next, or one
do.
campus
It's
to the
new.
next person.
I was going to add that now our stay-away agreements are electronic now, and they go from campus to campus, where it used to be a paper-based form, and so now the electronic stay-away agreement, we can pull up easily on our student profile system, and that's how a campus principal before a student is placed, now starting just this school year, was when they became electronic. So now it's very easy for us to see who had a stay-away agreement. I also will say, most principals and feeder systems have a great communication system from campus to campus, and I know I report that to my next feeder campus in meetings when we have transition meetings from campus to campus as well. So there's two avenues in which most of the time they're seeing things like that.
Yeah, and just personally speaking, I've seen that work well, like what you're referencing from Mitchell to McCullough. But I've seen it fail in other situations, and and you see other people online complaining about it. And like I said, we don't know their points, but and we can speak personally with either myself or our friends or our neighbors or whatnot, in situations they've run into. It's like, well, how do we improve this process, or how do we look at this process from a parent perspective? Because I think it's pretty clear cut from an administrative perspective, maybe how to follow that algorithm of yes, no to the proper result. But how as a parent do we see that in actuality and say, yeah, that's being handled correctly?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Maddox, if I'm understanding what you're saying, I think you're talking about closed loop communication in a standardized fashion. So when the investigations are done and the communication goes back to the parent, that there's either some sort of standardized form or standardized paper that says, this is what we found, this is what we're doing, so that it's not nebulous, it's there, it's concrete, and that loop is closed. It's been addressed or it's been referred out, something that is more accountable on both sides of the coin. And I don't know yet that exists. And
exactly to your point, also what would be nice is have that next action item of what's the next domino in the process to fall if this behavior repeats.
Yeah.
If your child is harassed for a second or third or fourth, fifth, however many times, we've documented now this fourth time or the second time. What happens if, let's say it didn't happen at Mitchell, but let's say something happened at Mitchell and we communicated, but then we go to McCullough and the same thing repeats itself. How do I go back to, the administration of McCullough and say, look, she dealt with it there. We need it to be stopped, so it doesn't follow onto the 9th grade campus. How do we document that? How do we make sure that documentation's in the communication? I generally just call it communication rather than documentation, but how do we have it documented, communicated, so that the process keeps moving forward and we don't get caught in the cycle of constantly going back to the same step A?
Yeah, I think these are great questions, and I'm happy to report that I'm taking on the bullying subdivision of mental health. So I will.
I'm more than happy to be part of that subcommittee.
Yeah,
it's just
for
this
sure,
is
for sure.
Yeah, this is something that like I said, I've dealt with it personally, and I know other people have dealt with it, and so it would be nice if we could dig into that nebulous, almost opaque process and kind of
Sure.
make it more transparent.
Yeah,
for the
no,
parent.
that's the goal. That's the
have
goal.
any programs for reparative or restorative justice, or anything that kind of like has a program or a process to it afterwards if the parties want to do that, or is that kind of like if you want to do that, you guys can do that on your own kind of a thing?
We do have processes in place to be able to, again, we were discussing the administrative side, what happens in the investigation and communication, and then there's the preventive side and the education side. So we do, but for the sake of time, I don't want to speak to something that's not the area that I oversee in the district. If that's something we do have of interest, we could bring back that piece to share with our parent group or community here, so that you can help communicate that as well to our district. And to Mr. Maddox, we can only get better if we hear, right? So thank you for the feedback. We appreciate it.
Additional pertinent documents are the policies that are listed here. The link is there at the bottom of the slide. But I look forward to working with you more closely on the bullying subcommittee.
This is just a question for, I guess, Dr. Upshaw, who is the person who oversees other than the board, I mean, because it is board policy, who is the administrator who kind of oversees the bullying and harassment policies to make sure that they're working?
So it's the administrative side of the house, so that would fall under our assistant superintendent of schools.
Okay.
Right, okay.
Okay. Here. All right, so moving on, I just wanted to, I won't take long because I know we're short on time, but I just wanted to put forth in front of the SHAC the updates from the 88th Texas Legislature Regular Session 2023. There were many bills that impact the business of the SHAC and or overlap with topics that the SHAC are responsible for. And so the take-home, if you remember nothing from right now, the take-home is that the Texas Legislature is getting very firm in regards to the school's responsibilities for fentanyl and opioid overdose, suicide awareness, and intervention to keep our kids safe from the drugs that are affecting our state substantially. So, House Bill 3144, the summary of that is October is Fentanyl Poisoning Awareness Month. Ms. Taylor brought this forward when we talked about Tucker's Law last meeting. I'm going to reiterate on that, but that's the take home from this bill. October is Fentanyl Poisoning Awareness Month, and we'll just keep talking about it because as long as we keep talking about it, people will learn more and we can move the needle in the right direction. Senate Bill 629 requires school districts to adopt and implement a policy regarding the maintenance, administration, and disposal of opioid antagonists. This is something new that will come out from the district. I did put an email into our legal side today to figure out where this was. It's probably something that is in process, but that will be coming down the pipelines. And what tails onto this is part of the SHAC's role in the education piece. Senate Bill 294 for our healthcare workers in the House. This relates to the use of epinephrine auto-injectors and medications designed to treat respiratory distress in students. There's additional language where it changes out asthma medication to medications designated for respiratory distress. So it's a broader category to help our students that have anaphylaxis or acute asthma attacks. So things that are very serious. 1506 puts more accountability on the school district for seizure management and a treatment plan. Again, all these things fall into school health and student health. So that's, and there's mandatory reporting regarding treatments that may happen with seizure disorders. House Bill 4375 requires school districts to provide instruction on use of AEDs. Those are automated external defibrillators, so the pads you put on someone during cardiac arrest. So AED instruction is now required to be part of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, so that falls into this corner of the room. And so these are things that we'll touch on as a SHAC to see what our district is doing between now and the end of the SHAC year, so we can help however needed to make sure that we're in target and online with these legislative requirements. And then lastly, for now, is the House Bill 3908. That's the Tucker's Law. So this one is Fentanyl Poisoning Awareness Week. It is the last week in October, is what you told me.
Red Ribbon Week, right? It's the same Red Ribbon Week, so it's
Okay.
last week.
Okay, so Fentanyl Poisoning Awareness Week will coincide with Red Ribbon Week. So the SHAC, this is where the changes for the SHAC are in red here. So the difference in the new legislative code that's changed the SHAC Bible, which is 28004, is that we're required to recommend curriculum that's research-based, that addresses the dangers of opioids, including instruction on opioid addiction and abuse, and addiction to and abuse of synthetic opioids such as fentanyl. So it's kind of a mouthful, but the short of it is, again, they're honing in on these synthetic opioids and how to keep our kids safe from fentanyl, which is a deadly drug at the doses that it's available publicly. So this is something the SHAC has to get done, and I wanted to put that out there again just to reiterate that we need to work on this. So that will be something that falls under the alternative health, and with Dr. Upshaw being the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, we will start to tackle this. Does anyone have questions? I know, it's exciting. Right. Okay, next. Oh, yeah. Okay. Quick little soundbite on your...
All right, I just wanted to share just some upcoming opportunities. This one is actually tonight at our Jet Center. It's Healthy Relationships, Teen Dating Violence. Montgomery County Women's Center is coming out to give this presentation. And so I just wanted to just kind of make y'all aware that afterwards it'll still be going on. We also have Tessa Stuckey. She is doing a kind of a series of this presentation. She is first going to the Woodlands Feeder Zone and presenting for the sake of our youth parenting in a tech-obsessed world. That's going to be next Tuesday, and it will be at the Woodlands High School. There'll also be another opportunity to see her coming up pretty soon on February 6th, which is a Tuesday from 6:30 to 8, and that one's going to be held at our JET Teaching Training Center. And so just we try to post these on our, on our guidance and counseling website, our district as well. We send them out to our campuses too to be advertised. So just be on the lookout for them, either through social media, newsletters, lots of different things. So I know from me, our counselors get them in our newsletter. And then I also believe that there's other times too where it may be sent to principals. So there's different avenues. And then I also share with Dr. Spear and Dr. Upshaw too. So yeah, absolutely. The ones for this one coming up. Okay.
All right, next is me. If you have a junior high or high school student in the school district, you have probably experienced science fair before. What you may not know is that it's judged entirely by volunteers, and in celebration of your volunteer service tonight, I would like to offer you another opportunity to volunteer this Thursday. You do not have to have a science background. You just have to enjoy hearing students talk about their science projects. There are 3 different times. You don't have to stay all day, but you could if you wanted to. So the high school kids are at 7:45, 8th grade's 9:30, and then 7th grade is at 2:15. This is put on through the Education for Tomorrow Alliance, so this is not me. If you would like to volunteer with them, you scan that QR code and register, and they would love to see you, and I would love to see you there too. Feel free to share on social media. It's not too late to sign up.
Thank you both. There it is. Any future agenda items people would like to speak about or suggest for the next meeting? And if you can't think of any right now, that's okay. You can still email us. Yes.
I have one.
Yep.
Is there a district policy or requirement that elementary schools have a Spanish language proficient staff member available all day to the students? Because there have been, over the past few years at Bush Elementary, several years that my kids have been there, there have been quite a few disconcerting situations in which, very young children, K through like 2, who are Spanish speaking only, have been put in situations that are very uncomfortable. I think which most parents would consider uncomfortable because there was not a capability for any staff member to communicate with them effectively about an issue. And so I just, because we put that out there, I don't know if that's something that would come from the shack or if that's. Yeah.
Being the former director of bilingual ESL, I can talk to you after. Absolutely. Yeah. I'd like to just notify everybody. I don't know if it's a request. I feel like I'm requesting. There is a process for the shack, just to kind of let you know that it's coming, is that we have a CISD wellness policy. It's a wellness policy that's required by the state. And in board policy, the shack is the entity that helps us as a district review that policy and vote it in. And that policy addresses our food of minimal nutritional value for the teachers in the room, FMNDs, administrators. Remember that discussion about a decade ago. Also, our health services requirement, and then also our physical education. So the minutes of recess and so on and so forth, all of that is part of that plan. So that will take 2 meetings for us. So it'll be something that we'll be working on throughout this school year. One where they come and give us the information and let us know how we collect all this information. You had heard Ms. Kersey mention how many minutes are on each campus for recess for us to discuss. And then as a group, we would then say, this is our recommendation, and then we would move forward with that. So that would be coming up this year.
Anything else?
I just want to get a clear answer to the question I heard earlier. Is it not a policy that in Conroe ISD that there is a Spanish-speaking person on staff at every school in the district? Seems like a pretty easy question to answer.
I wouldn't say it's a policy. It might be an administrative practice. So policy would mean it's a governing policy and district board policy. There's a difference, and we had a lot of discussion in past years, what's the difference between a guideline, a recommendation, and a policy. So obviously, as we grow in our LEP population, which is our limited English population, there's about 23% of our district, and there are 85 languages in Conroe ISD. I just want to let everybody know, 85. The majority of that population happens to be Spanish, but it's not necessarily, I would say, required. It obviously, if you're a bilingual campus, you have bilingual paraprofessionals and bilingual teachers, but that really is up to that administrator. If you're not a bilingual campus, you wouldn't necessarily have to have the need.
Is there a campus where there's not one student that doesn't speak English? I mean, I would assume that there's at least one student at every campus where there's a student that doesn't speak English. So wouldn't that by proxy make every campus bilingual?
Probably in multiple languages, right? So you start to think about our next language happens to be Urdu, Vietnamese. You know, it becomes that kind of a process. As our population has changed, I don't have the statistics for you to tell you that we do or we don't. But it's not something that the district says, while you're staffing, one person needs to be bilingual. Yeah.
So then I'd like that to be a topic then. I think it'd be a good thing to bring up because if there is a student or a family, that seems like a huge disservice to just not have one person identified that's Spanish speaking. And we can talk about speaking Urdu or Hindi or all those things, but the real issue, I think, would be covered by somebody being able to speak Spanish on campus for the largest portion of our population.
I overheard Dr. Medford over here. It is a best practice, like, right? You know, yeah. So, yeah, it is.
And I would just want to follow up what he was saying is that it's really the K through 12 group that I go to, or K through 2 group, because it's, you know, if you're above 5th grade, you can get out a phone. If there's something, an emergency, you can communicate gesture. A young kid is not capable of necessarily communicating with gestures, or they're having it's a health and safety issue. It's not a language issue, a barrier issue. It's a health and safety issue at that age to have someone who can communicate effectively with them.
I'd like to speak real quick on it. Being an elementary campus, I try to find, but it's also my applicant pool too. It's based off of that as well. And also, I'm not just going to hire a Spanish speaker if they're not the best applicant for my kids. And so I look for both. Ideally, I would want a Spanish, and I have a Spanish speaker. And so, you know, ideally we want that, but we also want the best applicant to be within our working with our kids as well too. So I try to find a balance of that as well. Last year we had a big spike in the Ukrainian population within my campus, and I was just fortunate that I had hired a para that could speak to those kids that couldn't speak one word of English. You guys say, oh, we feel for them. Absolutely, we do. And like for my campus, I don't have the bilingual program at my campus. So if I have a student that's speaking only Spanish, we really try to encourage our parents to tap into our bilingual program where my kids go to, because that's how they can get that support. But I try as hard as I can to hire those applicants if they're there.
So is there a policy in place for when a student, let's say a student, a 5th grader or 6th grader shows up and would like to report bullying or abuse, sexual harassment? What is the policy that's in place when that student comes to the administrator and says, I have this problem, but as the administrator stands before them, they don't speak that language? I mean, there has to be a policy somewhere, somehow.
So we do have resources in our district, and we have bilingual resources. There have been situations when I'm called, right? There's situations when we call in the front office. We have identified administrators in the district. We have, I'm just going to give an example. Early on, when we were growing in this population decades ago, Paula would have called me and said, Edith, I need help with this in that moment. Or so we do help each other. And we also have what's called Newcomer Center. You know, we have a Newcomer Center that there's one that actually happens to be in the Woodlands. You know, we have people here that do help with the intake of that as well, because you can imagine being an individual that's come here and all of a sudden I have to pick a high school plan. Like, I don't even know what credits are. So we help within registration, so on and so forth. And then one of the things that we also do as a district is when kids come in to be qualified to be in bilingual education, we have like site days where we have bilingual staff that then assess students in what's their English language proficiency, and our bilingual staff is there with the instructional coaches and our director and our coordinators and specialists, and we assist the campus with registration questions, so on and so forth. So we do have hubs and events for it all, but it all boils down to, it is obviously a best practice, but we can't, like Clifton said, Clinton said, we try, but I can't guarantee today that that's done in every school. There is a big effort, though.
Add to that, Brent, though, but the Spanish speakers are the ones who are fortunate because we do offer a program for them. All the other languages, there are no programs offered. So, state law is if there are 30 speakers of that language in the grade level, you have to provide a bilingual program. So if we had 30 speakers in Ukraine, okay, we'd have to provide the program. But they're fortunate, but oftentimes we find the parents choose not to have their children in the bilingual program. They think it's the best way for them to learn English. Is what parents will say. So, a little first grader, they had the option to go to the bilingual program, but the parent chose for them not to go. Now, as far as like your question when you asked about a child who doesn't speak English and they needed to make a bullying complaint to the administrator, we always find someone who can speak a language for a child, and we will reach out and get support for a child. But we have lots of other kids who have different languages other than Spanish that we are working with, and that answers them.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective as well. It's that's why I go to that K through, the kindergarten through second grade is really where I focus on, maybe in third or fourth. I mean, it's the younger children who don't have the higher level reasoning skills to explain an emergency. If a kid has a food allergy and they're having, they need an EpiPen injected. I mean, there's all sorts of case examples we could come up with why you need that, right? You need that person speaking
right. I'll give you an example. We had a little girl 2 years ago, and coming from a Spanish-speaking country and did not speak English at all. The parent wanted the little girl to be in the school to learn English. She broke her arm in the playground. We had no one to communicate with. Neither of the parents spoke English either. And it was a really challenging situation. And I will say, because of that, they enrolled in the bilingual program the next day because they realized the detriment the child was placed in that situation. But at least she had an option. If this were a Mandarin-speaking child, it would be a different story.
So I'm going to lay this down and quit belaboring my point, but I don't think it alleviates the CISD of any liability when there's a student that shows up that's in their classroom, regardless of what language they speak. And there should be a policy, if we're only looking at it from a legal standpoint just to cover the district, which is ridiculous, there should be a policy in place so that there is a student on that campus for any reason that somebody can be contacted day or night, after the football game, before the football game, at a dance, because they need an EpiPen, because they broke their arm, because their parent died away somewhere else. There should be a policy in place. And anything less than a policy, just something that we can write up that says this, you have a student that doesn't speak a language, we have a foreign language specialist that we can dial by phone, is an egregious mistake on our part. So it's not just Spanish, it's not just one person at every campus. I mean, that seems like, I wasn't even thinking about that. I mean, that's a bare basic policy that I can't imagine I can't believe it's not already written somewhere. I mean, why wouldn't that happen? But yeah, to say that they're fortunate, and I don't mean this as a slight, but to say that they're fortunate that they did speak Spanish and there was a program sounds a little callous. I mean, it's our responsibility. They're in our care, regardless of what language they speak. And if we can't properly care for them, it would be our responsibility to tell them to go to another district, I think. But obviously, we're not going to do that.
I've worked at hospitals where we dial into a translator if we needed, and we didn't have anyone on staff who happened to speak that same language. This may just be me assuming, I kind of assumed that Conroe ISD would have access to something like that. I'm guessing now maybe not so much, or maybe it's not as easily accessible to anyone and everyone.
I think these are all great questions, and I think we probably need to do a little digging, and then we can put it on a future agenda item if we be able to provide more information. Okay? All good questions.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a request for to revisit an agenda that I actually came here last year about. The 5Gs on the campuses, the towers that are affecting children, and we may not realize how it's affecting children, but it really is. And if we do have new school buildings
that are being built right now, we need to have a policy to not, put money in front of our children's health and to have a tower being built on there. Because the mental health committee, the anxiety, one of the anxiety issues, one of the causes actually, I was just doing some more research on this, is something called EMF sensitivity. And it can cause depression, it can cause anxiety, it can cause behavioral problems, it can cause skin rashes, sleep disruption, which is what happened to my youngest son when we moved to a new house, and the smart meter was directly behind his house, and we had to get a whole thing to cover that up, a shield, and it's a thing. Like, I'm very sensitive to Wi-Fi. There's a problem that it needs to be addressed, that people don't even realize the connection, like what are the things it's causing. And then since my subcommittee is going to be dealing with the testing, now the tests that are done by Pearson, which I'm really not a fan of. I left New York because of, that was one of my main reasons, because of them. But it's only allowed to be online as of last year. So therefore, students who have accommodations for paper tests, that's no longer an option for them. And students who have Wi-Fi sensitivity, like my younger son, has to sit there, which I opt him out and they tell me I can't do, has to sit there for the whole time to do a test? No. So we need to have some resolution for this and some options, and really I'm happy to look into it more. I mean, I'm getting more research emailed to me on a daily basis. It is a problem. People don't even realize it. There was actually a couple of people at McCullough that my son, when he was there, told me had brain cancer, and that is also a long-term cause that it can cause. We don't know that that was the connection. There's lots of other things, but we don't want to find out. We want to deal with this now before that happens.
We'll add it to the agenda, and thank you for bringing up the language barrier. I think that's really significant, and our policy is great, but we always have to start with doing the right thing, and that ultimately needs to guide what we need to do. So thank you very much. I think that's really outstanding. So, okay. I think that's it, right? All right. So, motion to adjourn. Anybody?
Seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I get a motion? I can't make the motion as the chair. Sorry about that. Yes. Second. All right. All in favor? All right. Yep. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.